Hello, I have returned. I'm going to do installment number 3 of BLU Review right now. Um, I have 3 titles that I wanted to talk about this evening, and they're all pretty fresh in my mind from watching the Blu-rays here that I received not too long ago. And so anyway, let me know what you think. First one is The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. I'm used to saying The Strange Vice of Senora Ward, which sounds much more palatable to me. But anyway, so that's how I'm going to refer to it. This is, show you the back here, you can see. This is a Giallo, an early Giallo by Sergio Martino. It actually launched his reign as one of the kings of the Giallo, so to speak, one of the maestros of the Giallo. And also his partnership with Edwidge Fenech, who had been in some German films in her late teens, and then gradually made her way into the Italian industry and became a sex symbol there all through the 70s. A lot of them were the sexy comedy all'Italiano films. I think she even did one with Lucio Fulci, and the others, varying genres, but mostly giallos, and often the scream queen, so to speak, of that genre, one of them. And, now iconic. These European actresses from that era and those genres are now, thanks to conventions and the internet and boutique labels such as Severin, who published this, these women are now iconic worldwide and fairly well known in America among film buffs anyway. At least their image and or their name, if not their body of work. So this film is it also has Edwidge's often used co-star George Hilton, who sadly passed away last year, and he was a great actor, a former great friend of mine who got me into giallos pretty much. Used to call him that handsome devil. He also called John Sorrell that quite a bit, which I found amusing. So, when he said that handsome devil, he was speaking of George Hilton or Jean Sorrell, who was in some giallos also, including one by Fulci, Una Sull'altra. So, in any case, Mrs. Ward is basically Senora Ward. It's about Senora Ward, Julie, and Julie is in kind of a love quadrangle. She's being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, played by Ivan Rostomov, who is always welcome in any movie as far as I'm concerned. And they had a S&M kind of relationship. And it seemed to be consensual from the flashbacks, but it got to be too much for her because it was pretty extreme things that he did to her. So she wants to get away from that, and I get that. There's people I've known who want to get out of that lifestyle. Then there's people who want to get into that lifestyle or stay in it. But regardless, she's now married to some respectable cat, Senior Ward. And he's, duller than the dishwater. And on the side, she becomes enamored of a cat named George, played by George Hilton. And George is, first seems to be kind of a cad, not respectful of her being married, doesn't seem to care, which we find out the real reason for that at the end. And generally not a cool guy, but that's just in the first couple of minutes of his appearances. So as time goes on, he's kind of like much more charming, and she starts to fall for him. He's much more interesting and funny and lively and spontaneous and sexy than her boring hubby. So we all know that story in real life and in fiction all too well. So basically, it continues along these lines with her ping-ponging among these three men, and there are different angles on her until there's finally she gets in a really bad scrape toward the end, and is apparently, all right, well, I won't give it away, but anyway, something dreadful apparently happens to her, and this ends up exposing the true agenda of the characters of the three men and what they really want for her and think of her, and etc. I won't go any further. I don't want to spoil it because it's one of those kind of red herring laden ones. You know, at the same time, there's a masked, black gloved, black clad serial killer on the loose, killing women with razor blades, and he happens to kill a woman who has a connection to some of these male characters, and that kind of puts things into motion. And he's kind of used as a scapegoat, so to speak, for who the real threat to Senor Ward is, or threats. And so, uh, anyway, there's some interviews on this Blu-ray, and the consensus from the people who worked on it was that basically this slasher with the razor blade, the black gloved killer, he was kind of thrown in as a concession to the giallo genre to make it more giallo-esque, other than this kind of weird quadrangle of intrigue, which they were inspired greatly by some real life murder cases, and as well by the movie Les Diaboliques by Henri Georges Clouzot. So basically, what we kind of have is so two layers of things are going on, and they seem very intimately related, and then they seem very unrelated and kind of non sequiturs, and then they turn out to be linked in ways we had no clue, and some really cool twists at the end. Anyway, that aspect of the film caused it to be given the kind of generic title Blade of the Ripper in some English-speaking markets. So, but we know it as The Strange Vice of Senor Ward. It's a beautiful print. I'm a huge fan of Sergio Martino's. I think he is, in some ways, my favorite director of giallos. I do prefer him to Dario Argento, and I realize that is blasphemy that could possibly be punished by death, or at least ostracization from film circles. But I just, that's how I feel about it. I really enjoy his stuff. I think his work is the logical continuation of the work that was being done by Umberto Lenzi in the late 60s, which followed Mario Bava and Ernesto Gastaldi getting this whole kind of genre off the ground. Argento, in a way, to me, is an outlier who became, among those people, who became huge. Now, he wasn't an outlier in Italian cinema. He was a film critic, and obviously he wrote some incredible spaghetti westerns, including some work on Once Upon a Time in the West, where he worked with Leone and Bertolucci. So, Bird of the Crystal Plumage was an immediate hit in 1970, even in America, which, of course, by the time I got into these movies in the 90s, that was pretty much forgotten, unless you're really a hardcore film buff. Most people either didn't know who Dario Argento was in the 90s, or they had rented or heard of Suspiria, because just so over the top and delirious in its cinematography and music and murder set pieces. So that was the first one I saw too, Suspiria, only out of curiosity for the title and the album, the VHS cover, box cover art. I had never heard of him before that. So this was like 1992. So to some, I'm a late bloomer, but for my age, I think I did okay, and I caught up fairly well. So anyway, back to Martino. I kind of prefer his stuff. It has a kind of, all of his films that I've seen, his giallos, which are several, have a certain mood to them, and the lighting is cool, the music is cool, the women are beautiful, the killings are very rough. There's eroticism, there's Tons of plot twists and MacGuffins, red herrings, you name it. Everything that would have made Agatha Christie excited. So this film, of course, set that template, or as Kat Ellinger said, the DNA uh, of the later ones are first found in this. She did the audio commentary for this film, and she's been doing a few lately. She wrote a book, All the Colors of Sergio Martino, which to me is her you know um, the equivalent to Tim Lucas's Mario Bava, All the Colors of the Dark, where he kind of appropriated a Martino title for a Mario Bava book, but it's a massive tome and it's quite definitive on Bava. And Mario Bava is my favorite Italian genre filmmaker, no doubt, and Giallo filmmaker of all. But in any case, so she did that for Martino, and I have yet to read the book, but I've read a few excerpts and read reviews and listened to a couple of her commentaries. Now, I used to know her briefly on Facebook well before she had finished writing the book, and I have a lot of respect for her. I think she's really knowledgeable and amazing. She's based out of Britain, and she works on the Diabolique magazine, I believe, that's online. And also my good friend Heather Drain works on that as well. If you're watching, Heather, hello. And some other very talented people, some of whom I also know through Facebook. But in any case, she does a great commentary. I haven't listened to all of it, but I've got about halfway through the film, and yeah, she knows her stuff, and I'm glad she's breaking through. She deserves it. So does Heather. Heather wrote some really nice liner notes for a little film that I actually have over here, if I can reach it. Emmanuel in America, and Heather did some really nice, interesting liner notes on that very extreme and unique film. That was also Severin. No, that was a Mondo Macabro exclusive release, a limited edition. And to be honest, I'm pondering selling my copy, but only because of expediency and need for fundage, because it's gone up really high, really fast. And I was among the first 50% of people who ordered the very limited run, and amazingly, got a low numbered piece. But it's no offense to Heather, because I love her work, and really no offense to the film, but it is one of my least favorite of the handful of Black Emmanuel films I've seen. I really love Emmanuel and the Last Cannibals, which Severin did a great job on, and which I covered in a previous video on this channel. You might find it somewhere. And that kind of brings us full circle. Severin did a great job on The Strange Vice of Senor Ward. There's some retrospective interviews with a film critic, Antonio, maybe Brunelleschi. I might have his name wrong. I wasn't familiar with him, but apparently he passed away shortly after the interview. And then some clips with George Hilton that are a little more recent, but unfortunately he passed away out after, maybe not shortly after, but after the interview in 2019. And they give them both special thanks, and it's wonderful to see their definitive opinions on this film before they shuffled off this mortal coil. And there's a great retrospective interview with Edwidge, which I'd seen before on one of the No Shame DVD releases. That's a defunct label that specializes in Italian genre cinema on DVD. Their DVDs are pretty valuable. Again, right now I'm selling a lot, 2 words, lot of 3 of the Martino Giallos on No Shame on DVD for a good, pretty penny, but they're worth it. They're collectible as hell now, since there is no more No Shame. But anyway, Severin is picking up the Martino stuff, and All the Colors of the Dark is come out, and that's an amazing film. That's not one of the ones that I'm selling. I'd never owned it before the Severin package, which I also covered in a video on this channel. So anyway, enough self-promotion. Overall, I loved this release. Severin, as usual, did a fantastic, amazing job. and we can throw superlatives at them all day, but there's tons of extras, the ones I mentioned, and quite a few others. The original Italian trailer is fantastic. I love it, and I found it on YouTube and rewatched it after I'd seen it on here. So anyway, the next film I'm going to cover is this one. It's called Hell Up in Harlem by Larry Cohen. This is an early 70s film starring Fred the Hammer Williamson, and Fred, of course, was a famous athlete in the 60s, and then he segued into film stardom. He appeared as the very politically incorrectly named character Spears Tucker Jones in Robert Altman's MASH in 1970. He was great in that, and the couple scenes he had. And from there, he became an action star. He occasionally dabbled in other kinds of roles, but generally through his entire career, he was an action superstar. He's still with us. He's over 80 now and still looks great, still sounds great. He's one of those guys I've never met. I have some signed pictures by him. I talked to his wife on the phone a few times to try to line up an interview. This is over 20 years ago. But unfortunately, I never have spoken with or met Mr. Williamson, and he really is one of kind of my heroes. And he's had his own independent production company, Po' Boy Productions, since the 70s, and he does it all. He writes, directs, produces, acts, etc. And quite a few of his films that he produced I really like, especially Joshua. Or Joshua the Black Rider, a spaghetti. It's an American. He produced it, and Bill Spangler directed it. But it's like a spaghetti western, and he was in a couple of spaghetti westerns. And it's very dark and grim. And for my last video and this one, now you're probably thinking, man, that's all he watches is dark and grim. Well, no, but that's an extreme that I do seriously like. Obviously, I like Oz and those kind of movies, so that's another extreme I like. I'm an extreme guy. So, Hell Up in Harlem was one of the ones that cemented Fred's stardom. The one that really did, that put him on the map, was Black Caesar, just prior to this film. And that was also directed by Larry Cohen, and that also kind of broke Larry Cohen. After that, Larry Cohen became even more famous for the horror film It's Alive. That's where I first heard of. Well, I first heard of the film when it was new. I was not much more than an infant myself, so I was a little better behaved than the one in It's Alive, and I might have been as weird looking, but I was a little nicer. I didn't have claws, but before It's Alive, there was Black Caesar, and it made a fortune on a small budget. And it was so popular that last minute, Larry Cohen was asked to do a sequel, and the way the end of Black Caesar is playing out, it looks as though Tommy Gibbs, the main character played by Fred, is going to pass away. We don't actually see him definitively expire on camera, and so like any good long form storytelling soap opera kind of deal, they use that as kind of a little loophole. And it's really cool because they wanted him to churn the sequel out fast, and the sequel is more action packed and more over the top than Black Caesar, which in itself is an incredible movie, but it's kind of like an epic drama rise and fall of a black gangster, whereas this one is like he's already fallen and now he's rising again. So you got like Tommy Gibbs rising, and he is rising, and also his father now is rising in the ranks. Thomas Gibbs Sr., aka Big Papa, played by Julius Harris, who's just fantastic in this movie. And the two of them are taking back what they lost, gaining more stuff. And then there's some internecine conflict, which is mostly put into motion by, you guessed it, the white authority figures. In the last movie, there was a guy, I think he was a lawyer, that was against him, but his main antagonist was this policeman who had almost crippled young Tommy in the early 60s when he was very young, or maybe late 50s. And he finally gets revenge in a very, again, a very politically incorrect fashion, but it's also very it's justice, from an angle of someone who hates racism, as I do, and I'm sure obviously Fred did and Larry Cohen. But the ending of this movie has the same kind of karmic reward for the main sleazy Caucasoid named D'Angelo, who is the district attorney of New York. And he is just, again, beyond redemption on any level whatsoever. And these are the kind of characters that your politically right wing people will say are encouraging white genocide, and that they're racist against white people. Well, I'm here to tell you, I'm a white person, and I could care fucking less about that. I think there are plenty of people in real life like D'Angelo and that cop, and they've made it very difficult for our brothers and sisters of other races over the centuries. So I have no problem seeing some cathartic payback on screen or even off, but we won't get into that with the current state of the world. It's pretty rough. So anyway, Help in Harlem is really nicely shot, a lot of great handheld work, and it's beautifully scored by Edwin Starr. James Brown did Black Caesar. That's hard to top, and I won't say this one tops it, but it equals it. There's especially this kind of pounding kind of war drum beat that comes up during really, really tense, dramatic moments that is just fantastic. And some good songs, and all done by Edwin Starr. And this one also has drama and an epic quality to it, but it's as Steve Bukowski of Shock Cinema, he called it pure adrenaline in a film can in an issue of Shock Cinema, and that was actually quoted on the back of the MGM DVD of this. I recently sold my DVDs of Black Caesar and Help in Harlem, and it was like cutting a limb off, but I'm selling most of my DVD collection. But anyway, I have not replaced Black Caesar yet, but I found an amazingly incredible deal, like $11 for this. I mean, it's a 20 on Amazon, and I think it's like 40 list price. So it was used like new, and it's incredible. There are some extras. It's by Olive Films, so amazingly, there are some extras that were ported over from the MGM. There's like the trailer, and there's the commentary with Larry Cohen. Maybe one or two other small things that I'm forgetting. But yeah, I highly recommend. Start with Black Caesar, absolutely. Then go to Help in Harlem, and then you'll probably be hooked by Owen Williamson and Cohen by that time, I believe, if this is your forte. Okay, so my final movie is HAXAN. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Swedish film from 1922, also known as Witchcraft Through the Ages. And this is a film put out by the Criterion Collection. You can see even the package looks classy. And the thing is, HAXAN, it's incredible. It was way ahead of its time in depictions of a lot of things. I mean, it was Swedish. It was 1922. There was no Hays Code and all. But it's not just that it has a lot of nudity and Satan worship and violence and weirdness. But it also has some incredible costumes and makeup, and even some incredible stop motion animation effects. 1922, that kind of, they're only in one or two scenes, but they just about rival the work of the gentleman who did The Tale of the Fox in the early 30s. And Laszlo Starowitz, I think he did that one, but he was a Russian stop motion animator, one of the early important ones. So it's amazing to see somebody working in that field that was probably a contemporary of his in Sweden. So, of course, he doesn't do a whole movie of it. He being Benjamin Christensen, the director. Now, the director does also write the movie and play Satan himself, the devil, in some very memorable scenes. And he has very cool and wacky makeup. Pretty believable. He sells it pretty well. It doesn't look dated or silly. A lot of the images in this film, there's tons of them, occult images that are just as powerful today as then. I mean, incredible seeing them, black and white stills of them. It's amazing. Unfortunately, I can't whip some out at you right now, but I will say that the cover, this is cool. This was a cover kind of part. This was taken from one of the scenes of still, but this is not really the best representation. I mean, that demon's cool and all, but there and this woman who he's anointing as part of Satan's cult of witches, who's naked. There's tons of female nudity in this film, but the thing is, he's not. He's the lesser of some of the creations that are shown in this movie, and I gotta say that I'm super impressed as always with this film. I first saw it in 1992 as Witchcraft Through the Ages. So what is Witchcraft Through the Ages? It's the same movie, but it's also a different movie. On Letterboxd site, it's considered a different film. So depending on which cut I watch, I'm actually watching logging two different films that I'm watching. Um, Witchcraft Through the Ages, basically in the late 60s, you had guys like Anthony Balk and William Burroughs who were working together on experimental films of their own, but also on restoring and republicizing cult films like Freaks. And one of the ones that they got to was HAXAN, and they recut it, and they went ahead and did some. Well, they scored it newly, and it was basically an avant-garde jazz band. Daniel Humer, the percussionist, drummer, he was the leader of the small ensemble, and there were four other guys. And to be honest, I always blank on the other three because I've never seen their work elsewhere. I've seen Daniel Humer and heard Daniel Humer's work; it's fantastic. But kind of the lead melody instrument is Jean-Luc Ponty, and violinist. Hopefully, I won't have to explain who he is, but I won't because then I'll go on another tangent that's really about music rather than movies. So the soundtrack's fantastic. And then they had William S. Burroughs narrate it. So you take a lot of the inner titles from the silent version and he just narrates them over the images rather than cutting back and forth. Though there are portions where they show the scenes with the inner titles with, the band with Ponty and Humer and company jamming over it. It's quite an experience, and I duped a copy of it from Blockbuster, and I watched it repeatedly throughout the 1990s. I was absolutely obsessed with it. I was obsessed with all things Burroughs, and I loved avant-garde music, and I loved the occult and supernatural. So this film was like, wow, I finally saw HAXAN itself, the original version, I think one time before Criterion put it out on DVD, and it was very different. The order of things was kind of the same, but it was much more structured and elaborate. Half hour longer, partially because of the inner titles, but partially just more footage and more in-depth footage. So not only do you get more story footage, but there are some more special effects, makeup, crazy shot footage. That's not a right word. More of that kind of stuff in the movie, and wow. And anyway, Criterion has put the two versions or two films, depending on how you look at it, on one disc, and they had done it on DVD, and I recently sold my DVD, and again, for a very small amount of money at an auction, I acquired this Blu-ray a few weeks ago, and I finally, broke down to watch it in the last couple of days and watched each cut twice all the way through. That's how obsessed with it I am. The HAXAN cut is not black and white. I mean, it was black and white originally, but it's color tinted as the director apparently intended. And so there's blues and reds and oranges, and I love silent films that look like that. The music is pretty good. It's kind of standard for 1920s, piano and orchestral accompaniment. It's not the best I've heard for this kind of film. It's not the worst. It doesn't really have any ambiance too much per se, and it definitely doesn't have the weirdness of the Ponty Humer work. But I will say it's fine. It's not distracting from the movie. It's not ostentatious or clashing with the movie. But the restoration is unbelievable. It looks like it was shot today, albeit in black and white, or in this case maybe black and blue. And it I don't know. It's stunning to see these creations of Christensen's come to life and look that pristine. The Witchcraft Through the Ages print does not have subtitles, and is not as well restored. It looks good, It's the best I've seen it look before. These are the same transfers as the one on the DVD. I'm 100%, well, okay, I'm 99% sure. They could have done some more work on the HAXAN print, and as a matter of fact, well, yeah, a new 2K digital restoration. I don't know if that's newer than the DVD, which came out several years ago. I think it is because this Blu-ray hasn't been out terribly long. So they've upgraded the image a little bit from the DVD, other than just it looking better being a Blu-ray. I highly recommend this. There's an introduction by Benjamin Christensen, a vintage one, and there's some other kind of odds and ends thrown in there. And but just having these two versions of this film complete and looking beautiful, it's incredible. And if you buy this one before Halloween, I think you should watch it on Halloween, one of the holidays, the days of the overall holiday season of Halloween, because it's perfect for that. Even though I just watched it 4 times or 2 times each, depending on how you look at it, I'm gonna watch it again, either on Halloween or All Saints Eve or Day of the Dead, somewhere in there. And I have watched it on Halloween's before. So they'll continue and cement a tradition for me. Closer to Halloween, real close to Halloween, I'll do a like top 10 or top 20 favorite Halloween-oriented Blu-rays just for my collection. So it won't be of all movies I recommend, but we'll just go through the library here. Which library is back there? I don't know if you can see it, but that's the blue library. I finally put it up against the wall and got it all kind of tricked out. And I'm real happy with it because that's going to be more my permanent film library. The DVD mountain that used to consume a huge amount of my living room is just diminishing ever so slowly but surely as I sell off, the vast majority of them. So anyway, I'm going to split because for once I'm kind of on time with this. I think I'll probably just stick to 3 movies from now on because 4 is, just talking this much about 3 only as a challenge for me, obviously. So that last one was enormous. I was very off the cuff and, not just unrehearsed, but maybe I was a bit tired. So I feel like a lot of my delivery and things I said were not as on the nose or, my wit was not all that sharp. It was fairly blunt on that one. So, so far I'm much happier with this one. Before I ruin it, I'll go ahead and leave and wish you guys the best. I want to thank everybody who's watching these and my friends who commented or given thumbs up or subscribed to my channel. You guys rock. So take care, and I will